I don't expect you to really remember the time of your first diagnosis, but maybe what your parents have shared with you in terms of what were the indicators that something was different or something was wrong?
So that's a great question. If you can only imagine a 3-year-old boy trying to walk around, I was dragging my right foot, I had my right arm kind of like this, and my face was twitching a little bit, and we just happened to be with my mom's college roommate who is a big-time nurse, and said, "You might want to go check that out." And lo and behold, I had a tumor the size of a grapefruit in my head that required immediate surgery the next day, that my parents had to make an executive decision on the spot that, hey, we need to do this ASAP.
How did your parents talk to you about dealing with something like this? I mean, it would be unimaginable for any family member, but to watch your 3-year-old going through something like that.
I didn't learn about my medical past until I was 17, being diagnosed with brain cancer for the 4th time. It wasn't until that moment that my parents started sharing about my past. I'll give you a great example of something that is near and dear to my father. When I was a little boy, 4 years old, walking through the halls at the University of Michigan hospital, I asked him, "Am I gonna live?"
Wow.
When there's so much big talk happening with my parents and medical team, a little child can take that in. And so that drove me to understand my situation and how my dad had to respond to me.
What is it that you've been diagnosed with?
I've been diagnosed with brain cancer. In simple terms, they are defective cells that all formulate in the same spot that will disease the other surrounding tissues, which require action to remove those bad cells from the area, and hopefully for those cells not to regroup and grow back.
Kind of walk us through your journey from that first surgery at the age of 3 and what happened after that before your next diagnosis.
So at the age of 3, that required the surgery. Literally the next 2 days after hearing the news. And due to the size and magnitude of that tumor, we also did chemotherapy. And then at 4 years old, it just had grown back because there was so much of it that it was almost impossible to resect all of it. So at 4, they went back in for surgery, and then I also had an additional therapy of radiation.
So at 4 years old, was that considered the second diagnosis
Yes.
then? Gotcha. And so then what state are you in? It sounds like just within a year having these back-to-back surgeries, what condition are you then in at 3 and 4 years old? Were you having to live in the hospital basically?
I was, and quite interestingly, what I've learned throughout the years is when you are essentially born with this, you don't know any different. There have been stories that my dad has shared with me about nurses at the time telling him we would get fired for us telling you this. But we have never seen a tumor as aggressive as your son, and to see him come out so strong as I was playing around, dancing around my IV pole with a smile on my face.
Because the prognosis was not good at the time that you were diagnosed.
Correct. Yeah, it was not looking good, and I have continued to impress and surpass the bars that have been set on my abilities from my medical team.
You were not expected to be here today. You were not expected to make it to a teenager.
Correct.
What did they tell your parents at that time?
They had to allude to all the possible outcomes. And with all the possible outcomes could be, there's also a plausible outcome that I could be great and that I could live a healthy, long, normal life.
But did they also warn your parents that you may not make it past the age of 4?
Yes, that was a conversation that had to be had, and that's why it was so difficult for my parents to then say, or to then agree to surgery. Do we want to go through with this surgery or just spend the time that we have left?
And so was that the first surgery then that they
Yes.
were told that prognosis with your age?
Yes. And then since then, that built up the motivation for my parents that I can do this. I can make it through. And particularly for my mother, I love her so much. It has never been, oh, let's do a big congratulations of where he's at currently. It's always, no, what's the next thing? How can we improve? What is the next barrier that we can reach? And so with that mentality, drove the motivation for myself and my team to really see this through.
Excellent. So after the surgery at 4 years old, was that considered successful? How did you recover from that, and what happened after that?
It was definitely successful. I lived an abnormal childhood where I spent a lot of time at the hospital with a slew of different kind of OT and PT and speech pathology, right? So it was all about getting me back up to speed with my peers. And then even after my procedures, going back to elementary school, I couldn't eat lunch with everybody else. I couldn't go to gym with everybody else. I couldn't go out to recess. I spent my time in the principal's office in a conference room in fear if I were to get shoved and fall over, that with my brain surgery and scar and all that could be affected in a negative way. So a lot of precautions were taken. I did do classes like everybody else, but I spent a lot of time with the therapies and then just being segregated a little bit to make sure that I'm staying healthy.
And you mentioned your scar. Do you mind showing us that a little bit? This you got after the very first surgery at the age of 3?
Yes, and they've continued to go back through this same scar ever since. We joke around that they should have installed a zipper because of how many surgeries I've had to endure.
So at the age of 4, after that surgery, you were considered to be in remission, but that didn't mean that you, as you said, were able to live life as if you had not gone through this. Kind of walk us through, you mentioned having to be segregated in school, but what were your other limitations? What was your physical state like at that point after the second surgery at 4?
So it's always been the same rehabilitation after each diagnosis, right? So it's always been a weakness in my right side of my body where I would have to do a lot of physical therapy to build up my right leg and my right arm, and occupational therapy for the fine motor skills to be able to pinch, right, to put your buttons together, right, and to do the monotonous things of life that we don't really think about, we just kind of do.
And just so I'm understanding correctly, that's not so much a result of the brain cancer, but more so the surgery of them going in that is affecting your ability on the right side. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's a little bit of both, where the area of which my tumor always returns, that is an area of the motor cortex that controls my right side of my body, such as my wrist, ankle, leg, foot, arm, my right eye, all of that. So the tumor has taken up that space, but also resecting it has left a bit of a hole in my brain of where brain matter would actually be in, let's say, somebody that has not gone through my situation.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes perfect sense. So after the second surgery, the second diagnosis, did you think you were in the clear?
I didn't really think much of it because this was a normal thing for me. It was normal to be pulled out of the class to go to therapy. It was normal to do all these really crazy exams. So I just thought this was the normal thing that people had to do. But as I lived on and gotten better, it wasn't in my mind that I would ever have to go through this again.
And at what point did you realize that was not the case?
So at 7 years old, I was diagnosed for the third time with brain cancer. And still being fairly young, it didn't really hit me how it hit my parents, right? There'd be an abundance of trays of food being delivered by the neighbors and loved ones that are outside the immediate family. All the prayers and best wishes. That hit my parents with a bit more of an extreme than my situation and how I interpreted what was happening to me.
And what about the fourth diagnosis? How did that happen?
That was the one that really impacted me the most, where I was alert enough. And when I was in high school, that's when I was finishing up 8th grade, that's when I graduated from all my therapies. I was ambidextrous, I was involved with multiple sports and extracurricular activities. I was really living a full life. And when I realized at 17, 10 years of being cancer-free, my family and I were actually going to celebrate at my graduation and have this blowout party, right, to congratulate the life I've lived so far. In the midst of that planning of graduation party, I was standing behind my neurosurgeon because I do yearly exams. Standing behind my neurosurgeon when she told us, "Max, it's back." My legs gave out from under me as I fell into the chair behind me of just, what is my life going to look like? How is this going to affect me? Yes, I kind of have a basic understanding of my childhood, but I've never looked too far into it because I thought that was just behind me.
And with that diagnosis, though, you had essentially sort of broken a milestone that doctors had not seen before or is not typically seen in terms of that 10-year stretch of being in remission. Is that unusual for this type of brain cancer?
I believe that my neurosurgeon had always had it in her mind that this is a potential to come back. That's why I monitored extremely closely, if not once a year for MRIs, imaging of my head, maybe a multiple per year. That's never changed. And so I've always been monitored very closely, but we've always made it through for so many years. And so when it came, it was just, okay, all hands on deck again. We're doing this again.
How long is the recovery process? You talk about physical therapy, having to regain strength on your right side. You know, I would imagine at that 10-year mark, it's almost like I'm just, kind of making it through this process, feeling back to having strength. And, how long is that recovery process to gain the strength back on your right side and feel like you're getting back to somewhat of normalcy?
That's a great question, because when I was a child and when you're younger, you can bounce back a lot quicker, right? So as I am living this life, and particularly after that diagnosis at 17, and then having to be disabled from that experience, that's when I really had to take a mental lap to figure out this new approach to my life. And particularly being at school at Grand Valley State, taking a full semester of classes, I was not devoting the same amount of time to those therapies that I once did. So the question is on you. How much time are you willing to rehabilitate your body? How serious are you taking your rehabilitation?
Fourth diagnosis at the age of 17, coming at such a crucial time in your life. You're getting ready to start your college career, and yet once again you're having to deal with the partial paralysis, how did that affect your time at school? You mentioned being on a second floor dorm room.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. In looking back, I don't know if I would have made the same decisions that I did, but I stuck the course. I've never been held back in school. I stuck with my peers, did the same activity as everybody else did, and so I wasn't going to deter from staying on that course. All my friends were accepted to universities, right? I'm going to do the same thing. I just want to be that normal kid. And I just had to take my years, months, weeks by every day. How can I get myself out of bed without falling? How can I tie my shoes with one hand? How can I get to class on time because I had a massive limp and I would trip myself walking every few steps because my right leg would dip down because I couldn't lift it, and then they would drag and then catch them behind my left foot and I would trip myself. So it's those kind of hurdles that I was dealing with on top of getting my coursework done.
And you were showing me, right now you have gained a lot of your strength back in your right side, but you were actually showing me the difference. Could you show me that again?
Yeah, sure. So this is a common practice that I do whenever I see my medical team, right? It's the comparison of my left hand to do this to my right hand. As you can see, it's a bit slower. And this pinky touch right here, I couldn't do this a month ago.
Wow.
I had regained that ability. And so this is the fine motor skills that I was talking about earlier with the occupational therapy and how crucial that is. And it's not that I don't have the muscle to do it, is I don't have that neuron pathway that when I think, do this, and then the muscles do it, it's that disconnect. And so it's trusting myself that, yes, I can do this, and then controlling it.
So here we are now, ahead of your 4th surgery,
Yes.
5th diagnosis. Kind of walk me through you getting that news, when that happened, and how we reached your appointment tomorrow.
Sure. So a few years back, my wife and I had a bit of a cancer scare where on the routine follow-ups, we started to notice a mass forming. But due to my last treatment of radiation, the stereotactic radiosurgery at 17, the side effects were scar tissue. And so in the imaging, we always thought, is it the scar tissue or is it the cancer forming again? And so it's always been within a certain diameter of, we don't need to do anything. But in recent months, it has gone outside of that circle of, we need to do something. And so we kind of had that scare a few years back. And like I mentioned earlier about the scans being a year apart, now it's every 3 months. So it's like, okay, what's it going to be this time? Do we need to take action? But now we are going to take action.
Well, you have such a good attitude about everything, but I feel silly asking you this, and we talked about it off camera, but does it get easier? You're now going into your 4th surgery, 5th diagnosis. What is your state of mind hours away from this surgery?
It's a delicate one. But first, for those who are facing hardships in this kind of situation, is I cannot dwell on the what ifs. I cannot forecast and start thinking about certain dilemmas that I might be facing because it's not true yet. I always like to say, think, act, then feel, right? To be illogical. But I will share with you this. With all the conversations I've been having with my medical team of the potential losses of my ability on my right side, one of the things that I think about is with my son who hasn't been born yet, being able to confidently pick him up in a few months with two hands, right? Because I might not have my right hand. And so how do I go about having that connection with my son?
Well, tell me a little bit about your family. I know they're here
Yeah.
with us today, and they're part of that tribe that you mentioned that's helping you get through this. Tell me a little bit about them.
My wife is an all-star. She is the ultimate wife. I have been so appreciative of who she is and how much care that she has for me. And before I married her, that was a big check of, yes, this is going to be a long-term partnership. And knowing that, she would extend that to our future children. So currently we have a 1-year-old daughter, Dottie, and she's just such an awesome child, very happy-go-lucky. And then my wife, Tori, and we are, I think, 3 months out to meeting our second child, who is a little baby boy.
That is wonderful. How long have you and your wife been married?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we got married in 2020, so about 3 years. We kind of got married right in the midst of the pandemic, but we were not going to let that hold us back. As my motto kind of goes with my treatment, you don't really let things hold you back.
Excellent. Tell me about your organization.
Max Your Brain, the powerhouse of motivation for brain cancer research. I started that when I was a senior in high school. Like I said, that big party for my graduation, over the course of 3 days, we got Max Your Brain together, and that graduation party turned into a big fundraising event where we raised $10,000 to really bootstrap this foundation. This foundation is directly tied to the University of Michigan Brain Cancer Research Program. So up until this point, 100% of the donations have gone towards research and what the researchers are needing.
What is your tie to University of Michigan? Is that because that's where you first received your treatment and they continue to look after you?
Yes. That's where, well, to bring it back just real quick, I believe this story is true in the fact that my parents did not go to U of M immediately when I was 3. I believe that we were seen by a different institution that denied care of me, that I was a lost cause.
Whoa.
And my neurosurgeon, first woman to be chair of neurosurgery, that operates from a wheelchair because she herself has spina bifida. She was the one who took on my case, and I've known her for 2 decades plus now. And so it's that dedication that kept me tied to the University of Michigan.
I mean, that is an incredible story in that you were denied treatment initially. I'm sure that even more so is what's pushing you to provide research and subsequently treatment for others in your position.
Yes, so my foundation does not do the research. We are just a soon-to-be nonprofit that helps spread awareness to all the families that get affected by this, and then encourage others that there are potential better treatment options out there, and to let the world know, yes, this is happening. Let's work together here, and then Max Your Brain will cut the check to what is needed for the researchers in Ann Arbor. Moving forward, I'm launching my own motivational speaking service to work with organizations that would like to cut a check for charity, donate to Max Your Brain, and I will come out and work with teams to spread my message, help motivate others, and utilize a framework mindset that I've used over the course of 5 years to help advance solving big problems.
And you've also talked about the importance of research and its evolution, even just from the time that you started this journey at the age of 3 and how you've seen it change over the years. And that's important to someone in your position going through this. Talk about the changes that you've seen.
When I was 17, receiving the stereotactic radial surgery, it's 12 beams of radiation that come in and out of your brain with this arm that kind of goes around your head to shoot these beams, kind of like Star Wars, where all the beams intersect at one point, giving it a maximum dose of the radiation. In order for that to happen, there's this halo that you wear on your head. I had to have it screwed into my skull, and then they insert me onto the table. And I'm awake while I'm doing this, right? Nowadays, they don't have to screw it into the skull anymore. There have been advancements in the research and medical technologies to make it a better patient experience.
And I mean, talk about how important that is for you to now be an adult. How old are you now?
I'm 28.
And to think about, you have young children now, you have a young child, another on the way. So to think about a young child in that position and the advancements in the technology, how does that make you feel? You know that young people can be going through this, I'm assuming, traumatic experience, and now maybe not just as much because of the advancements. I mean, how does that make you feel?
Makes me feel great, and not only, let me back up. The confidence that I have received is I work with patients going through similar treatments that I've been through. But when I went through them, it was years ago, and these are patients going through similar treatments, but with all the advancements. And hearing from them, just like that halo example, that almost brings tears to my eyes because I know how much that impacts the patient experience. Right? The medicine might be there, but it's the patient experience of when you first show up to the hospital, how the physicians interact with you, how the ease of use of these different therapies. And that's what I'm motivated to help push further.
Absolutely. What do you want to tell our viewers as we share this story the weekend heading into Christmas? For many, it's just family time and getting gifts and sharing gifts. And here you are taking on this incredible feat. What do you want viewers to know about how you're able to keep such a great attitude and this time that should be just full of joy, and you've got an incredible challenge ahead of you?
A big part of the building blocks in relationships. I'm having brain surgery. Who knows what I'm going to be like afterward? When I was 3 years old, I was having my first brain surgery to take out a tumor the size of a grapefruit. And that was very similar timing around the holidays. But as we have time off work, we still need to equip ourselves with empathy. When you're having conversations with your loved ones and those that are kind to you, take a pause and ask that additional probing question, using empathy, really hearing from others, giving that other person the space to feel heard and give them the confidence to really dive into whatever they're saying. It is not on us to push whatever it is that we're going through, because everybody has things that they go through. So let's work on empathy and probing questions to just really have great active listening, because everybody wants to be heard.
You talked about it already, some of the risks that you're facing with tomorrow's surgery. Is there anything else besides the potential loss of mobility? What are the risks that doctors are trying to prepare you for in terms of the potential outcome after tomorrow's surgery?
It could be anything from losing my peripheral vision, which is kind of a scary thing to think about. Once again, losing my right hand and right arm. my right foot and having that, I call it my swag walk, but my dip in my right foot and going through that. Or my face, my smile might not be as
Symmetrical.
even and symmetrical. I might have a little bit of a dip in the right side of my face. Those are the things that are the what ifs that I can't put too much weight on because it hasn't happened yet.
And anything else you want to say to how you're able to stand here hours before your surgery, smiling, joking, such a great attitude, something so many people could learn from. How do you do it?
I've struggled with low points in my life, but it's just the basic appreciation to grab a glass of water with your right hand, left hand, whatever it is, to pick it up and take a little sip of water. I once couldn't do that with my right hand, but now I can. It's the basic fundamentals that we all have, most of us can do. So when you kind of reset your perspectives a little bit and knowing all the capabilities that you do have, all the capabilities that I have, I can do anything now. I can push the envelope at work. I can support Max Your Brain. I can drive people to the website, get the merch, make a donation. This is all going to a great cause.
You also work a full-time job?
I do.
Do you mind sharing what that is? Not necessarily where, but what do you do?
I'm an applications engineer, and I help develop packaging lines for all the food that you get off the shelves.
What am I leaving out that you wanted to be sure to talk about today or share with the viewers about your experience?
I am not the only one that goes through this. There are many families that are affected with this terrible disease, which is cancer, particularly brain cancer, the only organ in the body that's irreplaceable. You heard it from me about what I'm facing. I'm not the only one. I highly encourage people to follow my journey. Check out maxyourbrain.org on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I'm going to document my experience, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you again. But just trust yourself to know that you're capable.
And lastly, max your brain. I mean, it's got, such a ring to it. What does that mean to you, to max your brain?
Max Your Brain means power. It's the motivation. It's the courage to push the envelope. It's to maximize your brain potential. And it also means in my heart that we are helping other families.
Perfect. Excellent. Great stuff. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you for your time.